welcome my fellow whisperers. Before we begin, if you like slow burn dread, empty back roads, and stories that don't blink first, hit like, subscribe, and settle in. Turn the lights down if you're brave. Put your headphones on. This one's for the night drivers, the restless walkers, and anyone who's ever trusted a stranger because the alternative was the cold. All right, let's start on a road that doesn't show up on most maps. Rain had been thinking about falling all day. It hung in the sky like a held breath, bruising the late afternoon light, turning the world the color of old dishwater. The kind of weather that makes car headlights look like pale coins and makes every puddle seem deeper than it is. The kind of weather that encourages bad decisions. Evan made those for a living. He stood at the shoulder where Route 6 thinned into county blacktop, the paint lines worn like a memory. The land around him was a patchwork of low fields and dead corn stubble, broken only by the skeletal ribs of leafless trees. Their branches clacked together when the wind nudged them, a dry, insectal sound. Somewhere far off, a dog barked one sharp note, then silence, as if it regretted announcing itself. Evan's thumb was out. His other hand held the strap of his backpack, worn canvas darkened by damp. His hair was too long for someone trying to look harmless, and his smile, when he decided to use it, had the smoothness of a practiced lie. He didn't look like trouble. He'd learned the art of being unremarkable. The clean hoodie, the jeans, the scuffed shoes, the slightly tired eyes. A young man on the road, hungry, cold. Hope was the easiest costume. A truck went by without slowing. A sedan did the same. Evan watched them pass with calm patience. There was no rush. There never was. People who needed to get somewhere quickly were predictable. They didn't stop. The ones who slowed were the ones with room in their hearts or holes in them. The first fat drops of rain hit the road and popped like tiny blisters. He lifted his face, tasting the air. Earthy smell, wet dirt, the faint metallic tang of distant lightning. He could feel the storm sliding toward him, quiet and inevitable. Behind his ribs, his heart beat steady, obedient. He could wait. Then headlights appeared around the bend, soft at first, then brightening as the vehicle approached. Not fast, measured, cautious. An old station wagon, the kind that had survived on stubbornness rather than maintenance. Its body was a pale color that might once have been cream. Rust freckled the wheel wells. The roof rack held nothing but years. It slowed, turn signal clicked, tires hissed on wet asphalt. The passenger window rolled down with a reluctant whine. A woman leaned across the seat to look at him. Her hair was gray and curled into a helmet. Her face had the tight, careful friendliness of someone who'd practiced it in a mirror. The corners of her mouth pulled upward like they were being held there. Her eyes were sharp, bright as pins. "Honey," she called, voice cutting through the rain. "Where are you headed?" Evan stepped closer, letting the rain bead on his lashes, making his eyes look glossy. Vulnerable, he made his shoulders slightly smaller. North, he said, anywhere closer to Briar Hollow, or just somewhere dry. The woman looked back toward the driver, who sat with both hands on the wheel, as if it were the last honest thing left in the world. The man was gaunt and long-faced, his skin the color of old paper. He wore a cap pulled low and a heavy coat that smelled faintly of cigarettes and something else, earthy, sour. His eyes shifted to Evan, then away, like looking too long might invite something. The woman smiled wider. Briar Hollow's not far. We're headed that way. Evan let relief soften his expression. Seriously, that'd be amazing. The woman's gaze flicked down to his backpack. You got family up there. He hesitated just enough to suggest pain. Not really. Just trying to get back on my feet. Everyone's trying, she said, and the words had an odd weight to them, as if she meant something different than most people did. The man finally spoke. His voice was low, worn. Get in, son. Evan thanked them. He made sure to sound grateful. He climbed into the back seat, letting wet air and the smell of old upholstery wrap around him. As the wagon pulled back onto the road, the woman twisted in her seat to face him. Up close, her perfume fought a losing battle against the smell of damp wool and age. Her hands were knotted with veins and rings. I'm Mabel, she said. That's my husband, Orrin. Orrin grunted without looking back. I'm Evan. Evan, Mabel repeated like she was tasting it. Such a nice name. How long you been walking in this weather? Most of the day. He shivered on cue, though the cold didn't bother him the way it bothered others. Cold was honest. Pain was honest. People weren't. Mabel tutted. Oh, sweetheart, that's no way to live. Orrin's eyes stayed on the road. The wipers moved like tired metronomes. We've got a place up ahead, Mabel said. Warm, dry, a meal in the oven. Evan tilted his head. That's really kind. It's nothing, she replied quickly, too quickly. We don't like the idea of young folks out in the storm. Briar Hollow's full of bad sorts these days. Evan's mouth quirked. Yeah. Mabel nodded. Oh yes, people go missing. You hear it on the radio, you see it on the flyers at the gas station. Travelers, drifters. Orrin's jaw tightened. His knuckles were white on the wheel. Is that right? Evan asked, gentle. Mabel's eyes glittered. World's got teeth. Most people don't realize until it bites. Evan leaned back and let them talk. He let the wagon eat up miles of wet road, the sky darkening from gray to charcoal. He listened to the way Mabel's voice rose and fell. He watched Orrin's hands, the rhythm of his breathing. He noticed how the doors were locked. In the back seat, tucked between the seat cushions, Evan felt something hard brush his fingers when he shifted. A cable tie. He didn't pull it out. He didn't need to. The wagon turned off the main road onto a narrower one, then narrower still, gravel popping beneath tires, the world closing in. Trees crowded close on both sides, their trunks blackened by rain. The headlights made tunnels through the dripping branches. Evan's phone had no service. He hadn't expected it to. Finally, the trees parted and the house appeared. It sat low and wide, like something that had sunk into the land and decided to stay there. A farmhouse with peeling paint and a porch that sagged. Light leaked from the windows, warm and golden, trying hard to look inviting. Beyond the house stretched a yard of muddy grass. Past that, behind a sagging fence line, shapes shifted in the dark, large bodies moving with slow purpose. Pigs. Even from the car, Evan could hear them. A wet, constant sound, the grunt of throats, the shuffle of hooves in mud. It was a hungry noise, a noise that could swallow things. Oren parked near the porch. The engine ticked as it cooled. Mabel turned in her seat and smiled at Evan like he was already family. "Come inside, dear. You must be starving." Evan stepped out into the rain. The cold air wrapped around him. He smelled wood smoke from a chimney, and underneath it, that same earthy sourness he'd noticed on Oren's coat, stronger now. Something like fermented feed, and something like old blood trapped in soil. Oren didn't speak. He just walked toward the porch, shoulders slightly hunched, as if the weight of the house pressed down on him. Mabel lingered beside Evan, holding his elbow with a grip that was too firm for comfort. "Watch your step," she said. "Mud's terrible." On the porch, a wind chime made of bones, small ones. Maybe deer clicked softly in the breeze. Evan's eyes flicked to it, then away. He didn't let his face change. Inside, the warmth hit him like a blanket. The living room was crowded with furniture that didn't match, all of it worn. There were framed photographs on the walls, old family portraits, children who'd grown into adults, adults who'd grown into memories. But there were also other pictures, tucked among them, faded snapshots of smiling strangers standing beside a car, a campsite, a roadside diner. People Evan didn't recognize. Mabel noticed his gaze and gave a little laugh. "Oh, just folks we've met over the years. Oren's always been a friendly one." Oren hung his coat on a hook. His eyes didn't touch the photos. Mabel bustled toward the kitchen, and Evan followed, letting his backpack thump lightly against his spine. The kitchen smelled of onions, grease, and something sweet baking. A pot simmered on the stove, lid rattling softly. On the counter sat a loaf of bread and a stick of butter. Domestic, normal, but there was a hook set into the ceiling beam near the pantry door. Heavy, unused looking, but too thick to be decorative. On the wall, a calendar hung open to a month that had ended 2 years ago. Mabel pulled plates from a cabinet. "Sit, sit," she pointed to the table. "I'll get you a bowl." Evan sat. He kept his posture relaxed. He watched Oren hover in the doorway like a man, unsure whether he belonged in his own home. Mabel placed a bowl in front of Evan and ladled stew into it. The steam rose, rich with spices. "Eat up," she said. "It'll put some life back in you." Evan dipped his spoon. He took a bite. It tasted good. That was the worst part, how normal it was. How easy it could be to confuse kindness with camouflage. Mabel sat across from him with her own bowl, but she didn't eat much. She watched him chew, watched his throat move when he swallowed. Oren sat at the end of the table, farthest away. He stared into his stew like it had answers he didn't want. "How old are you, Evan?" Mabel asked. 21, Evan lied. He was older than that in the ways that mattered. Mabel's eyes softened. "So young, you got a girlfriend, a boy back home." Evan shrugged. "No one waiting." Mabel's mouth twitched. "That's sad." Oren's spoon scraped his bowl too hard. The sound made Mabel glance at him, a quick flash of irritation. "We have a spare room," she said brightly, turning back to Evan. "You can sleep there. Storm's going to be bad tonight." "That's really generous." Mabel waved a hand. "Nonsense. We'd be heartless to send you back out." The word heartless hung in the air like smoke. Evan ate slowly. He made conversation. He asked them harmless questions, how long they'd lived here, whether they had family nearby. Mabel answered too much, too eagerly. Oren answered with grunts, his gaze sliding away whenever Evan looked at him directly. When Evan finished, Mabel rose, taking the bowls. "Now, bathrooms down the hall. Get yourself cleaned up. I'll set some blankets out." Evan stood. "Thanks." Mabel smiled. "Of course." He walked down the hallway. The house creaked under his steps, as if it resented being disturbed. At the end of the hall was a bathroom with floral wallpaper fatting at the edges. Evan turned on the faucet and let the water run. He stared at himself in the mirror. His face looked like any young man's face. That was the trick. It always had been. He splashed water on his cheeks. He listened. In the kitchen, Mabel's voice dropped to a murmur. Oren answered in something even lower. Evan couldn't hear words, but he could hear tone, Mabel's clipped impatience, Oren's weary reluctance. Then the back door creaked open. The pigs outside roared louder for a moment, as if sensing movement. Evan dried his hands. He stepped silently back down the hall, stopping before the kitchen doorway. Mabel stood by the back door, holding a metal tray. On it sat a glass of milk. Oren stood near the counter, hands braced as if he might fall. His face was pale. Mabel's voice was honey. "We'll give him something to help him sleep, just a little. He'll wake up later. He won't feel a thing." Oren shook his head barely. "Mabel." She turned on him sharply. "Don't start. We've done this before. We need to eat. And the pigs need to eat. And it's been too long since someone stopped." Oren's eyes darted toward the hallway, as if he felt Evan's presence, like a cold draft. Mabel lowered her voice. "Don't you dare go soft on me now." Evan stepped back into the darkness before they could see him. So that was it. The old couple with the warm stew and the spare room. The pigs, the missing travelers on flyers. It would have been almost quaint if it hadn't been so practiced. Evan returned to the bathroom, turned the water off, and waited. A few minutes later, Mabel knocked on the door. "All done, dear." "Yeah," Evan said, letting his voice carry a touch of fatigue. "Come on then, I'll show you your room." Evan opened the door and followed her down the hall. Mabel's footsteps were quick. She stopped at a door and pushed it open. The room was small and neat. A narrow bed made up with a quilt, a lamp, a dresser with a doily on top. It smelled faintly of lavender and something stale, like an old closet. Mabel set the lamp on and turned to him with a gentle smile. "There we are. Now, I brought you something warm." She held out the milk. Evan stared at it. The glass was sweating slightly from the heat of the house. He could smell it, not the milk, the bitterness threaded beneath it. He looked up at Mabel. Her eyes were bright and expectant. Evan smiled back. He took the glass. "Thank you," he said softly. "You're really good people." Mabel's smile widened, pleased. "Oh, honey." Evan lifted the glass to his lips, tilted it just enough to make it look like he drank. He let a drop touch his tongue, then swallowed hard as if he'd taken a mouthful. He forced his face into a sleepy grimace. He murmured, "That's nice." Mabel's hand hovered near his shoulder, almost affectionate. "Get some rest." As she turned to leave, Evan's free hand slid into his backpack, fingers finding what he'd packed. Not a weapon in the obvious sense, just something useful, something that could become anything in the right hands. Mabel stepped into the hallway. Evan moved. He was quiet, quiet like the moment before a trap closes. His arm shot out. The strap he'd taken from his bag looped around Mabel's throat from behind, not yanking, not jerking, just tightening with controlled inevitability. Her breath hitched, surprised more than panicked at first. Evan leaned close, his mouth near her ear. "You should have asked," he whispered, voice calm, intimate. "If I was hungry." Mabel's hands clawed at the strap. Her heels scraped on the wooden floor. Her eyes bulged, but Evan didn't pull harder than necessary. He didn't rush. Rushing made it messy. He liked to feel the moment stretch, to feel the realization bloom inside someone when they understood the story wasn't going the way they thought. Mabel's feet kicked once, twice, then found less purchase. Her body trembled in short, furious bursts. Evan's face didn't change. His breath stayed even. She made a thin sound, something that might have been a word. Then slowly, her hands weakened. Her rings clinked against the strap one last time. Evan held her a few seconds longer than he needed to. When he let her down, she folded to the floor as if her bones had been removed. Her hair, so neatly curled, fell out of shape. Her eyes stared at nothing. The hallway was silent, except for the rain tapping at the windows. From somewhere deeper in the house, Oren called, "Mabel." Evan stepped over the body and walked toward the kitchen. Oren stood near the counter, his back half turned. He looked up when Evan entered, and for a heartbeat, Oren's face held confusion. Then it drained into horror. His gaze snapped past Evan to the hallway, to the shape crumpled on the floor. Mabel, Oren breathed, the name breaking apart in his mouth. Evan watched him like a scientist watches a reaction. "You were going to drug me," Evan said, not accusing, stating. "Tie me up, feed me to your pigs." Oren's face contorted. His eyes shone wet, not with anger, but with something older. A grief he'd kept penned up behind duty and fear. We had to," Oren whispered. Evan tilted his head. "Had to." Oren's shoulders sagged. "You don't understand." Evan took a step closer. "Try me." Oren's eyes flicked to the back door, to the dark yard where the pigs churned and rooted in mud, impatient as a stomach. "She started it," Oren said, voice trembling. After the factory closed, after the money went. She said the world didn't care if we starved. She said we could make our own way. Just a few travelers, people nobody would miss. She said it was mercy. Quick, no suffering. Evan smiled, and it was the first honest expression he'd made all evening. "No suffering," he repeated, amused. Oren's face crumpled as if he'd been struck. He stared at Evan, really stared, and something in Evan's eyes told him what he was speaking to. Oren's hand moved toward a drawer, slow, uncertain. Evan's tone stayed gentle. "Don't." Oren froze. His whole body shook. "Why?" he rasped. "Why do this?" Evan shrugged slightly. "Because you invited me in." Oren's breath came fast. His eyes looked wild now, but not with fury, with despair. He stepped away from the counter, backing toward the living room as if he could retreat into some earlier version of his life. Evan followed. Oren's gaze kept darting toward the hallway, toward Mabel, toward the fact that she was not going to get up and scold him for being weak. "Jesus," Oren whispered, and it didn't sound like prayer so much as regret. "Mabel." He sank onto the edge of the couch like a man whose strings had been cut. His hands covered his face. His shoulders bowed inward. It was not the posture of someone ready to fight. It was the posture of someone whose world had ended, and all that was left was the quiet hum of consequences. Evan stood in front of him for a long moment. He could have ended it quickly. That was easy. But easy was never what he wanted. Evan crouched in front of Oren, close enough that Oren could smell him, rain, road dust, and the cold metal note of intention. "Oren," Evan said softly, like a friend. "Look at me." Oren's hands trembled as they lowered. His face was wet. His eyes were red, raw. A man hollowed out. Evan watched that hollowness widen. "You loved her," Evan murmured, almost curious. Oren's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Then, brokenly, "Yes." Evan nodded, as if that answered something important. "So it hurts." Oren flinched. Evan reached out and placed his hand on Oren's shoulder, not comforting. Possessive, claiming. "You know what the funny thing is?" Evan whispered. You were going to make it quick. You were going to tell yourself that made you better. Oren's breath hitched again. Evan's fingers tightened gently, like a warning. But you still did it. Oren's eyes squeezed shut. I didn't want to. Evan's smile returned, and yet, Evan stood. He moved toward the kitchen, rummaging through a drawer until he found what he wanted. Not a dramatic weapon, not a gleaming blade from a movie, just something heavy, ordinary, meant for chores. He returned to the living room. Oren looked up, and whatever he saw in Evan's posture drained the last strength from him. Oren tried to stand. His knees failed. He sank back down. Please, Oren whispered, not for his life, for something else, for meaning, for forgiveness. Evan stepped closer until his shadow swallowed Oren's feet. I'll give you one mercy, Evan said. You can choose what you think about when it happens. Oren's face twisted, and a sound escaped him, half sob, half laugh. The noise of a man realizing choices were always illusions. My Mabel, Oren breathed. Evan nodded. The rest was fast enough to be almost kind, and slow enough to be unforgettable. When it was done, Evan stood in the center of the living room and listened to the house settle around him. The rain had intensified, a steady roar on the roof. The wind pushed at the windows, testing for weakness. In the backyard, the pigs grew louder. Sensing what the night had brought, Evan dragged the bodies one at a time toward the back door. He didn't struggle. He was careful, practical. He'd done this before in other places, other houses, with other names. Outside, the mud sucked at his shoes. The pig pen fence was rough wood and sagging wire. The pigs were too big for anyone pretending they were just pets. Their eyes reflected the porch light like dull coins. They pressed against the fence, snorting, eager, mindless. Evan opened the gate. The pigs surged forward, a wet mass, and the night filled with their frantic sound. Evan did not watch closely. He didn't need to. He knew what hunger did. He knew what teeth did. He stood in the rain and breathed in the smell of mud, feed, and something darker that the storm couldn't wash away. Behind him, the house glowed in the darkness like a lantern left out for someone who would never arrive. Evan closed the gate and latched it. He walked back to the porch. The bone wind chime clicked in the wind, cheerful as a child. Inside, he moved through the kitchen and found a rag. He wiped his hands. He cleaned what needed cleaning. He was not sentimental. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even satisfied in the simple way most people meant it. But beneath his skin, something churned. The night had been a hunt, and also a surprise. He'd stepped into the trap of another predator and turned it inside out. He'd watched the moment Mabel realized control had slipped away. He'd watched Oren collapse into grief, so pure it was almost holy. And now, standing in that shabby kitchen with rainwater dripping from his hair, Evan felt it, the surge. Adrenaline. It hit him in a clean wave that made his fingertips buzz and his vision sharpen. His heart beat harder now, not from fear, but from aliveness, from the electric rush of the edge. A laugh rose in his chest, and he swallowed it down, breathing through it like a man riding out a storm. The world outside was endless. Roads stretched in every direction. People drove through the dark with their doors locked, their radios on, thinking they were safe because they had rules. Evan packed his backpack again. He didn't take much, no trophies, just what he'd brought. The strap, the useful tools, a small flashlight, a bottle of water. He paused at the kitchen table and tore a piece of bread from the loaf, chewing as he walked, because it seemed almost polite to finish the meal. At the front door, he stopped, listening one last time. The house was quiet now, emptied of voices. Evan stepped out onto the porch, and the rain hit him like applause. He walked down the muddy drive toward the road, the darkness swallowing him, and then releasing him again when lightning flickered behind the clouds. The trees stood like witnesses. The fields lay flat and indifferent. When he reached the blacktop, he turned north. Headlights appeared in the distance, approaching slowly through the rain. Evan adjusted the strap of his backpack. He rolled his shoulders. He let his face soften into something human. He lifted his thumb. The car slowed. A window rolled down. A voice called out, cautious but kind. "You all right out there?" Evan smiled, small, grateful, harmless. "Yeah," he said, "just trying to get somewhere warm." The storm roared around them. The road waited. And Evan, still buzzing with the aftershock of what he'd done, stepped toward the car like it was the most natural thing in the world. Because for him, it was. Thanks for listening. If you made it to the end, leave a comment with a single word. Roadside. I read them all. And if you want more slow horror like this, more back roads, more strangers, more doors that should stay closed, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, lock your doors and don't pick up hitchhikers in the rain.